Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you guys being here. My name is Sadia, and I am a mentor as well as the head of US partnerships here at Lumiere. I'm super excited to see a lot of you here tonight and also some familiar names. So thank you so much for joining us wherever you're located, whether it be late, early, or just a normal time for you. But we really appreciate all of you guys taking the time to join us today to hear about how to ace your college essay. I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to have tonight with Matt. But in the meantime, we are still waiting on a few more students to join, as well as families. So please, in the chat, if you can type as usual your location where you're joining us from. And then if you're a student or a parent, and if you are sort of like already writing your college essay or you have not thought about it at all, you're just a beginner. We would love to see where you guys fall in terms of how much you've heard about how to prepare for the college essay or how little. This will give us good insights. And you can type your answers in the chat. Take your time. We will start in about a couple of minutes. And please don't be shy. I'm expecting a few of you at least to let us know where you're located. If you don't want to share the other information, you can also just let us know where you're joining from. Okay, we have Taha. He's from Pakistan. He has his essay almost complete. Girish, parent from Virginia. Smita from California, parent to a junior. Long Island, New York, student in sophomore year. Great. High school senior in Minneapolis, process of beginning the essay. Okay. Junior from China. We have someone from New Jersey. Yay, I'm from New Jersey. And so is
Hey, a lot of New
originally.
Jersey.
And someone has already finished their essay. Awesome. Parent from New Jersey senior drafting. Tons of New Jersey folks to hear tonight. High school senior in the middle of college essay prep, also from New Jersey. High school senior from Arizona, already have some ideas for the essay. Amazing. So glad to see all of these great answers. And thank you so much for joining us from all around the US and the world. So I think we can go ahead and get started. So I'm super excited tonight to be joined by Matt McGee, who's the founder of MRM Education, and elite tutoring and college admission consultancy in the LA area. His work advocates for academic curiosity, mental health, and confidence in students with the ultimate goal of admissions in top universities. Matt has over a decade of experience as an admissions specialist and consultant and tutor, and he has mentored many, many students to improve their grades and also gain top admissions in Admission Plus schools. He's also a member of NACAC and HECA. And without further ado, I want you guys to all welcome Matt, and I'm going to pass it over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Sadia, and hello to everybody, especially to the New Jersey people, born and raised in Morris County, for those of you who know the area. But yeah, Sadia more or less did the intro for me, so that took care of all that. My name is Matt McGee. I am the founder of MRM Education, and I've been doing this for a really long time. So today we're going to talk about getting deep into the personal statement rather than approaching kind of all the questions that you get asked on your college essay. And one of the things we have to keep in mind as we go through this is I was on a call about a week ago with an admissions officer from Yale, and they set out very quickly to say, look, we understand that when we're looking at an application, we have a two-dimensional person. We have numbers, we have a list of activities, we have a resume, but what we don't have is the actual person. What we can't see is your personality. We can't see what you laugh at, what your interests are. And the goal of the personal essay or the personal statement is really to draw that out. And so that's really what we're looking for. And everything we go over today, I want you guys to think in context of that. So few of the things that we are going to go over today. We are going to go over choosing a topic, so brainstorming, how to kind of till the soil for all the things that have happened in your life to help you choose the most engaging topic. We're going to talk about your personal theme. For those of you who have heard what an application theme is, or you've already started developing your application theme, it is the through line that runs through your academics and your extracurriculars and your other activities. And we want that to also be showcased in the personal statement. We're going to talk about creating a compelling narrative, which is you could have the best content, you could have the most interesting, engaging story in the world, but if you don't know how to tell that story, if you don't know how to write that story, it's going to fall flat. We're going to talk about the implicit why, which is something that we at MRM Education have developed in terms of trying to make sure that students are humbly letting schools know why them. And we're going to go into that a little bit deeper. We're going to cover big mistakes to avoid, which will be not only the most common mistakes we see, but the mistakes that will really make an admissions officer not want to read the rest of your essay, that will make an admissions officer kind of glaze over, be bored, and sort of just want to go next. And lastly, we'll cover a couple of common essay structures and how to use the examples and the stories from your life most effectively with those structures. So first, well, this is who I am. Sadia covered this, so I will skip most of this, and I'm just going to get right into it. So today, I'm going to cover mostly the Common App. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know if you're applying to the UC schools or you're applying to other schools that have applications outside of the Common App, there are different requirements there. But just for expedience sake, I am going to be talking about the Common App. If you have questions about the UC apps or any of the other applications that aren't on the Common App, feel free to ask those. We can get into those. But for this webinar, we are going to focus on the Common App. So 650 words is what they're expecting. I say aim for 500. Your admissions officer is reading hundreds of essays every day, and we want to make sure that we are being respectful of their time. You have 7 prompts to choose from. We will go over those on the next slide. This is your real big chance to showcase your perspective and your experiences. Ideally, you're going to showcase your unique perspective and your unique experiences. It's an opportunity for you to tie your extracurriculars and your academics together. Going back to what I said earlier about theme, this is where we're going to find the theme through the extracurriculars that we chose, the theme for the classes that we chose, for what we kind of are looking to do in the future. And we're going to bring all of that together, and the personal essay allows us to tie those things together. And finally, going back to what I said about the Yale admissions officer I spoke to, this essay brings you to life. You are a sheet of paper as these people see you. You are a collection of test scores. You are a collection of grades. And this is the one piece of writing where you get to jump off the page. This is the one piece of writing where you get to become 3-dimensional and you get to show them your personality. So this is not an opportunity to showcase your academics or the things that you've done. It's an opportunity to showcase you, your personality, and what you stand for. So let's dive into the prompts. So go ahead, screenshot this, take a photo of it. It's very easy to find, so I'm not going to take a ton of time here. But just to go over these, we have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful to you, you believe your application would be incomplete without it. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. Reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. Reflect a time when you felt grateful and how it affected you. Discuss an event or realization that sparked a period of personal growth. Describe something you find so engaging that it makes you lose track of time. And the most important one, share an essay on any topic of your choice. Now, the reason I say that this is the most important one is it gives us a clue into what these admissions people are looking for. And that is the most authentic, genuine version of yourself. The first 6 prompts are here to give you some sort of guidance. They're here to spark your brainstorming. They're here to give you an idea of where to go, because to say, do whatever you want would be a little bit too vague and very difficult task. But they leave that seventh one in there for you to give you the freedom to do what you want, because they want the most authentic, genuine version of yourself. And they don't want you to be hemmed in by what they've given you. So look at those prompts as guides, but also understand that you can be free of these prompts, and you should feel free to be as open and truthful and genuine as you can throughout writing your personal statement. So diving into the writing, let's talk about choosing your topic. So the place that I really like to start with my students is, what are you passionate about? MRM, as college counselors, really try to focus on what you are passionate about. We believe that the more you focus on the things that you actually care about, the more you will succeed in getting into a better college, but the more you will also enjoy the process of doing this. So if you approach this from a place of trying to write something about what you think the admissions officer wants to hear, or trying to write something that you think will be advantageous insofar as making you unique or interesting, you're going to hamstring yourself. You really want to focus on the things that you're passionate about, the things that you love, what lights your hair on fire, what sets your soul on fire. If you start with those things and you list them out, I guarantee you, you'll start to have a really great way into this essay. This is automatically going to create authentic and engaged writing. Again, these admissions people are reading hundreds of essays a day. You need to be authentic. You need to be engaging. You need to get them to sit forward when they read your essay. And when you're writing about things that you care about, things that you love, things that you're interested in, things that you already know things about, you get people to lean forward. You get people to love what you're writing about. Relate it back to your theme and your narrative, right? So if you have already developed your application theme and you want to say, hey, I'm somebody who cares about social justice, then maybe that's where you should start with your essay. You want to come back to who you are and where you're going. And these are great ways and great places to start and try and figure out, hey, maybe I should write about this topic, or maybe I should write about that topic. Lay out all of your possibilities. I mean, everything. You should comb your life, comb it all for interesting stories, for humorous anecdotes, for turning points that really affected you, for interesting people, for people who touched your life, for anything that really stands out to you. And even if you think, well, maybe that could work, you should write it down. If you're like, well, I'm not sure it should work, you should write it down. If you're like, that probably won't work, but it's kind of interesting, you should write it down, because we don't want to edit ourselves too early in the process. So often when we work with students, when they're writing not just a personal statement, but any sort of essay, when they limit themselves and they don't tell us about certain things that they have had happen in their lives, we can't help them kind of figure out what the best way to write that is. And so if you're editing yourself and you're saying, no, that doesn't work, or I don't really think that they're going to want to hear that, you're really limiting your possibilities. And then once you have this list of 5, 10, 20 topics that you could potentially write about, free write on more than one. Now, I'm not saying that you should go out there and write an entire essay for each one of the topics, but get started. Write an introductory paragraph. Write a little bit about it. Do a free write, do a rough draft, and see how it works. Because what you'll discover is that topics that you didn't think were interesting are actually much more interesting than you thought, or topics that you thought were going to be very difficult to write about are actually really engaging. Topics that you thought were going to be home runs, they're really difficult to work through. So if you start to free write on more than one of these, you'll see which ones are really hitting the spot for you. Ask yourself the question, which story adds to my application? And what I mean by that is, your extracurriculars say one thing about you, and your academics and your course load, that says another thing about you. Your activities, they say another thing about you yet, and your supplementals are going to say another series of things about you. What have you not said yet? What can you say in this essay that we haven't repeated? Remember, admissions officers are reading the entire essay. They're admitting students holistically. So we want to make sure that we're using every bit of real estate that we can to let the admissions officer know as much as possible about us. So what story or what example or what thing has happened in your life that is really going to add to your application that hasn't been stated already? Refrain from writing modular essays. This is a really common thing we see where students will say, hey, I want to write about this topic because I think it'll work for this essay and this essay and this essay. And that, I get that understanding. You want to be as efficient as possible when you make your application. However, it doesn't serve you insofar as writing a strong essay. You want to pick the topic that is going to be easiest for you to write about. You want to pick the topic that is going to move you the most. Ultimately, as you go through these, you will see that different essays work for different questions, and you'll be able to repurpose them. But doing that beforehand is going to draw away from your essay, and it's going to get into a place where you start changing it and moving it so that it fits in a box. When, again, going back to the prompt, we don't want this to fit in a box. We want this to be very free, very natural, very genuine. And lastly, we want to start with the end in mind. What do you want your reader to take away from your essay? You are selling the admissions officer on something here, whether it's you want them to know that you have a growth mindset, or whether it's you want them to know you're very service oriented. Whatever it is that you want to get across, you should pick that and write it down. And then from there, once you have all your topics down of the things that you brainstormed and the things that you were passionate about in your stories, you can start to look at those and say, which of these really show the example that I want to show the admissions officer? Which one of these show that I have a growth mindset? Which one of these show that I have a very service-oriented mindset? That's where you want to go. And if we start with the end in mind, the whole process becomes much easier. A little tip: don't write what you think the admissions officer wants to hear. Instead, focus on what you want the admissions officer to know about you that you weren't able to put elsewhere in the application. A quote from the Harvard website on this says, your topic does not need to be exotic to be compelling. Again, this is going to be the theme of the evening. Be genuine, be authentic. Don't tell them what you think they want to hear. Tell them what you want them to know. So we're talking a lot about theme. We're talking a lot about your personal narrative. And again, what do you want to get across to admissions? Do you want to get across that you're intellectually curious? Do you want to show how much you've grown, or an event that made you mature significantly? Do you want to talk about how you're socially aware? Do you want to focus on your empathy, your resourcefulness, your critical thinking, perseverance? These are just a few options, but you know, the list is endless. Whatever it is that you want to show, that's going to be the kind of beginning of your personal theme. And that's going to show up not just throughout your essay, but you're going to want it to show up throughout your application to say, I am somebody who is intellectually curious. I'm always jumping at opportunities to improve what I know, to learn better, to become a better human. If that's what you want to put across, then that's what you should really lead with. And so once you have answered that, what anecdotes and life moments are going to contribute to that? If you want to show the moment that you realized that intellectual curiosity was the foundation of your life, let's talk about that. If you want to talk about the moment when somebody really turned you on to what it meant to be an empathetic human being, focus on that. And when you do, we want to be specific and we want to be descriptive. Again, we can't just say, I am socially aware, I am mature, right? We want to get into the specificity of it. Describe the moment. I had a student who I was working with today who was talking about the moment that their film teacher in high school actually reached out to them and gave them tips on how to play guitar. And this was so meaningful because the film teacher had no business teaching her guitar. There was nothing he could gain from it. But she introduces us to the scene, and she describes the feeling of the string and the feeling of the wood on the guitar. That doesn't mean you're writing a novel, but get descriptive, get interesting, and be specific. You're also going to have to answer both the why and the how. And what I mean by that is you're going to need to answer the why you care about this thing, and how insofar as showcasing how you are this thing. Going back to the intellectual curiosity, tell us why you are this way. You're going to go with the anecdote and you're going to tell us why this means something to you. And then we want to know how. We want to hear you showcase that. This is how I express my intellectual curiosity. This is an example of me executing this in real life. And if you don't have both the why and both the how, it's going to come off very incomplete. We also want to relate this tangentially to our field of study. I want to be clear here. We don't just want to talk about our major in our personal statement. In fact, there should be little to no mention of that. However, if you really, really care about a service-oriented mindset, and you want to be a physics major, you need to figure out a way to merge those two things. Maybe you tutored students in physics who are a little bit younger than you. Whatever that is, we want to try and bring those things together so that the admissions officer reading this kind of goes, yeah, okay, this student has an eye on the future. This student understands where they're going, and they're not just kind of throwing things out there to say what they think I want to hear. Use humor. Again, this is a chance for you to show your personality. It's a chance for you to become a three-dimensional human being. One of the things that we can't learn from you about your extracurriculars and your activities and all of this is what you think is funny. What is your sense of humor? That doesn't mean that you should set out to just make the admissions officer laugh, but if you can inject humor tastefully and sparingly, you will do yourself a favor insofar as simply entertaining the admissions officer, which goes a lot further than you think it will. And lastly, where is this taking you? What does the future hold? So we can't just say, hey, I am this socially aware person, or I learned that empathy was really important, or I'm such a good critical thinker. We have to say, so what? We have to say, what's next? So I grew. I wasn't this way. Now I am this way. What is the next thing that I'm doing? How do I fit into your university? And that's really what you have to kind of go at with the what does the future hold? So if you look at all three of these, we're kind of saying we're looking from the past, this is what I was, to the present, this is how I've changed, to the future. This is how, as a new person, I plan to go forward at your university and beyond and be a new person, to be a productive member of society, to be someone who achieves above and beyond. And if you're having trouble defining your personal theme, the way I like to kind of put this to our students is, I'm studying X to become Y to solve Z. And I have a couple examples for you here. So these are all students that we have worked with before. And as you look at this chart, I want you to think the Z is really where your personal statement topics come in. So we had a student, they wanted to study STEM so that they could become a programmer because he cared a lot about ethics in technology, and he wanted to make sure that AI remained ethical. So his essay was all about ethics in technology, which is a great theme because not only is it interesting, but there's tension there. Ethics, technology, they don't always go together. And we'll talk more about what tension in theme is. Land management. We had another student who was studying land management. He wanted to become a sustainable farmer, and he wanted to solve climate change. His essay was all about the trees in his backyard. Not a particularly exotic or interesting topic, but he described the trees with such beauty. And the moment he described was realizing that nature was so beautiful that it was worth protecting. And in his essay, he didn't set out to solve climate change in just those 600 words, but he did let us into the idea of we can be sustainable business owners, we can be sustainable agricultural people and still be effective and still be business people. And that's where he got us in. And he got very specific by showing us the beauty of the trees in his backyard and the beauty of nature. And we learned from him that he was someone who really loved nature, and he paid such exquisite detail to him that when you read his essay, you leaned forward and you said, wow, this is really, really enjoyable to read. I learned something today. Finally, we had another student who was studying history and film so that she could become a writer and producer because she wanted to solve education as entertainment. Basically, her story was that she was always bored in school. And one day her professor showed her Saving Private Ryan. And she wrote her essay about this moment, about always being bored in history class and never being interested. And the moment this teacher turns this on, and seeing the waves hitting up against the boat and seeing Tom Hanks's face, and she's bringing us into this moment. And then she starts to talk about how it affected her and how she saw education differently from that day on. And then, like I said, she went and she started to talk about the future. So this is what I want to do. So this is how this has changed me. And in these cases, all of these students got very specific and they told us about what their eye was for the future. So once we have our theme all set out, we want to really choose, we want to figure out a way to write a compelling narrative, because it doesn't matter how interesting your story is. It doesn't matter how traumatic your story is. It doesn't matter how different your story is or unique it is. If you do not have a compelling narrative, the admissions officer is just going to glaze over, and it's going to look like every other essay that they've read that day. The first thing in creating a compelling narrative is to focus on good writing. It needs to be clear. It needs to be free of errors. It needs to have a logical structure, and it needs to have a strong through line. If you are applying to one of the top schools in this country, as I'm sure many of you on this call are, if you submit an essay with a bunch of errors in it, or that isn't really easy for the admissions officer to follow, you are not going to get into the schools you want to get into. These are easy things that anyone can do. Check your grammar, proofread, do these things, because it will do a lot for you. The first step to creating the compelling narrative is anchoring your essay on a specific anecdote or a meaningful story. That doesn't mean that you're going to say, hey, I'm just going to tell this story and have no point to it. It means you're going to use the context of this story to explore your theme. I was working with a student a couple of weeks ago who used the story of the first teacher who ever made him use a pen. Said the first day, teacher said, anything that gets handed in pencil is going to fail. And so he wrote his entire essay metaphorically about the difference between using pens and using pencils, and how using pens was really about making your mark, and how you had to throw yourself fully behind something when it was in pen, because you didn't have the option of erasing it, right? So he didn't just say, hey, my chemistry teacher taught me that I had to use a pen, and so therefore I started throwing myself into everything. He used the context of the story to really explore the theme of making your mark, of showing up, of mattering, and of really throwing yourself into everything. But when we get specific in our anecdotes and into our stories, and we get descriptive, that's really when admissions officers are able to kind of get an idea into who you are as a person, what your writing style is. We want to make sure our story develops and it grows. So we see a lot of essays come through that will essentially just be a collection of extracurriculars, one after the other. These are my accomplishments, or we go back to, this is a thing that happened to me, or I really care about this thing, whether it's healthcare or climate change, or if you wanted to go back to the students we talked about before, entertainment and education. Your story has to grow. You have to grow in your story. There has to be a beginning, there has to be a middle, there has to be an end. Like it says on the screen, there has to be a conflict and there has to be a resolution. So the general structure, and we'll talk more about the structures, but you have to be somewhere, and then something has to have changed you. And that's really going to be the crux of the essay. When something changes you, how do you cope with it? How do you deal with it? Does it stop you, or is it just a challenge that you had to work through? And then once we kind of get through that, then we have to start talking about how we grew from that and reflecting on that before we then get into our conclusion. And the important thing to know here is story structure. We want our action to be rising all the way to a climactic event, and then it can come down. But if your essay is just one straight line across, and you're just telling the admissions officer, this is what I care about, or this is what happened to me, you're not going to be interesting. You're not going to jump out off the page. You always need to grow. Even if your essay is about a traumatic event, it needs to be how you've come out the other side of that. We had a student write about a very challenging topic, about an eating disorder, something she was still in the throes of. And she wrote this essay, and she explained that she was still in the midst of this. But she talked about, even in this essay and this thing that she was still struggling with, she talked about how simply writing this essay and taking the risk was something that was completely new for her. And that was a new direction for her. And that meant that she wanted to be somebody who took more risks in the future and who did put herself out there in that way. And it wound up being a very good essay because it had this conflict, this resolution, this place for her to grow. And lastly, like I've touched on before, an eye on the future. Where are you going? What is the next step for you? Right? As you hit your climax and you talk about, hey, this was the moment of my life that has changed me. So what? So where does it go now? And I want you to think about this is when you're answering this in the admissions officer's mind, you are answering the question, how will you be a member of our student body? What is it going to be like having you on campus? How are you going to participate in our culture? And that's a big question that they're asking. Because again, if we get back to the idea of the personal statement is all about creating you as a 3D person, as a full person, the way you're going to interact with the student body, the way you're going to interact with the professors and the other resources on campus is a huge part of that. So you need to give some sort of an idea as to who you are and where you're going, how you're going to be, so that they can say, yeah, I see how this person fits on campus. This person's going to bring a unique perspective to campus. This person's going to add to our campus. Because if you're not adding to their campus, they're probably not going to want to accept you. So a little tip, and we talked about this on the last slide, level up your essay by creating tension within your theme. So the example, don't just write about empathy, write about empathy in a hyperpolarized world. So there are lots of themes that could exist in your essay. We covered a bunch of them, being socially aware, being service-oriented, intellectual curiosity, empathy could be one. You could write about technology or the climate, but an essay becomes really interesting. A story becomes really interesting when we start to create tension within the themes in that story. So the way we do that is by taking a theme, but then adding a layer of difficulty on that. In the ethical AI or the ethical technology example, those two things often don't go together. Technology does cause problems. Maybe mental health is one of the big themes in your essay. Can you address mental health and talk about mental health as it pertains to social media? Again, there's tension there. With empathy in a hyperpolarized world, we don't always see so much of that. So how do empathy and a hyperpolarized world kind of create tension with each other? And how can you address that tension through your personal narrative, through who you as a person, through what you're interested in, through what you want to do in your life? Because that's when you're going to get the admissions officer to say, wow, this person has some ideas. This person is really thinking ahead of their time. They're thinking outside of the box. And when you get into these really top schools, that's what these admissions officers want. They want forward thinkers. They want innovative thinkers. They want creative thinkers. And you'll level up not only the quality of your essay, but the quality of your personality if you do that. So let's move on to the implicit why. Now, you probably haven't heard this before because this is something that I haven't seen with other college counselors, but the purpose of the implicit why is because I see a lot of essays that come through that are really well written and they're very interesting and they're very engaging, but ultimately they leave you feeling a little bit like, meh, and that's a problem. When you're applying to a school that has 20,000 applications for 1,500 spots, you can't be meh, and you can't have had bored the admissions officer. So the implicit why is the way that you address why you are the perfect candidate for that school. So I want to be very clear here. This is not me telling you that you should turn your personal statement into the why us question that you'll see on every supplement. This is not that. I don't want you to talk about any of the schools you're applying to. This essay, the personal statement, should focus fully on you. However, the personal statement is implicitly about why me, right? So there is a pitch here to your school, to the schools you're applying, to say, I am an ideal candidate for your school. And so the way you should really think about this is you should be implicitly and humbly, and that's very important to be humble in your essay. You should be implicitly and humbly answering the question, we have thousands of qualified applicants every year. Why should we offer you a spot at our university? We have thousands of qualified applicants every year. Why should we offer you a spot in our university? And that's where you should take your theme, the idea that you want to get across. I am an intellectually curious person. I have a growth mindset. And that's where you have to sort of get to this idea of, because of this thing, I am perfect for this school. I stand out above other people. I am not just another applicant who's going to bring this quality or that quality. I am this. And that's really what you have to do. And you have to do it implicitly. By no means should you say, I am the perfect candidate for Cornell, or at the end of your essay say, and because of all this, I believe I am a great candidate for your university. None of that. But you do need to think about this question. And if after you've read your essay, you don't feel that this question is answered, you need to go back in and add a little bit more or rewrite a little bit more to really get at why this university should choose you. Why are you the specific person in this specific moment that they should let in to their freshman class? So let's talk a little bit about some of the major pitfalls that I see. And these, like I said, these are really common ones, but they are also really big ones that will hamstring you through your process. So cliches, these are the really common ones. The big game, sports injuries, trauma, mission trips. I was just on a call yesterday with a Northwestern admissions officer, and she actually said, if I see another essay about a student who went on a mission trip and learned about how lucky they had it because of seeing people who were less fortunate, I might just gouge my eyes out. So this gives you an idea of how many times they see that essay. As far as trauma goes, look, if there has been something that has happened to you that you do feel is central to your identity and makes you the person you are today, it is okay to write about that. But we get a lot of students who think that they just need to find something super sad or something awful that happened and write about that, when it's not always the case. They see a lot of essays about that, and unless it's truly central to who you are, and I mean it's a huge central piece of you, avoid this. Sports in general, the big game, sports injuries, unless you're trying to go play on their sports teams as a Division I athlete, do not write about these things. They are so common, it's not interesting, and they've seen it so many times. Not writing your essay about you. This is one that I see all the time and would land you in hot water if you submitted it. Oftentimes, people will write an essay about a role model or someone who is important to them. This past year, I had a student write an essay about somebody who had passed, and it was a really lovely essay. But at the end of it, I said, Shane, I have no idea who you are. This is great if you're the person in the essay trying to get into college, but you're not. So even if you are writing about, someone who changed your life or someone to whom you're grateful, you can't really dedicate more than, I would say, 20% of your essay to giving us the context of who they are. And that should mostly focus on the qualities about them that touched you and the anecdote that you can get into to be really specific. But your essay has to be about you. It cannot be about anybody else, and make sure that it is about you. Gimmicky structures or styles. A lot of people do this because they think it will make them stand out, or that the admissions officer will, sort of have a break from their monotony. I've had students try and write essays that were styled as screenplays. I've had students try and put poems instead of prose. Don't do it. Occasionally, you will see something that has a different structure that sort of works, but it's very minimal, and it's really sort of like a harmonic to their essay. It's not a major part of it. If you can't tell your story without a different structure or some sort of weird pattern, you're probably not on the right path. Stick to the traditional prose when you're writing this. A resume in prose. This is very common, especially with high achieving students who want to get into top schools. You guys have worked so hard to do the important extracurriculars. You've gotten awards, you've gotten achievements, your activities list is great. And then you think that the personal statement is just a place for you to put all of those things. It is not. Like I said earlier, it is a place for them to see who you are as a person. I would rather you write a poem than write your resume on here. You shouldn't mention your extracurriculars. If one comes in and it's just a brief mention because it relates back to what you actually wanted to talk about in terms of, who you are as a person, okay. But this is not a place for your major. It's not a place for your extracurriculars or your work experience unless those things relate specifically to an example. And in that case, you get a sentence or two just to let us know. Trying to sound smart. We get these essays all the time that looks like the kid went through a thesaurus to try and make the essay sound smart. Write it in your natural voice. Write it in your natural tone. Do not try and sound smart. One, you're not going to sound smart. Two, other people are trying to do this, and these admissions officers who have been reading these essays for 30 years can see right through it. Don't try to sound smart. Write in your natural voice. Feel free to be somewhat casual in the way you write about this. Contractions are okay. That doesn't mean you should be using internet slang or, writing you as the letter U, but you should write this in your voice. You are a 17 or 18-year-old, or, I know we have a couple juniors on the call. You're a 16-year-old. Write this as a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old sounds. They don't expect you to be an English professor. They expect you to be you. And lastly, forgetting the implicit why. Not telling the school, hey, this is really why you should admit me. This is what makes me stand out. There's got to be a little bit of a humble brag at the end of this. And if you don't have that, they're going to say, great, that sounds like a really interesting thing. We'll see if we can find a spot for you. But it's not going to be an acceptance, and maybe you get pushed on to round two. Maybe you don't. And the tip, again, this is a big one. Don't rehash your extracurriculars. Focus on something deeply personal. They're going to see your extracurriculars. They're going to see your activities. Do not waste your space. Do not waste your time putting these into your personal statement. They will see those. Instead, focus on being descriptive. Focus on really getting into the inner workings of this story and how they relate to who you are as a person. And then a few essay structures. So these are the common essay structures we see. So we have the espresso, the smoothie, the hybrid. I did not name these. The espresso is named that because you have kind of one thing throughout. In the smoothie, you put many things into a smoothie. So look, with the espresso, this is going to be your most common essay. This is something happened to me, or I learned something, and you're going to introduce that for about 20% of your essay. Then you're going to talk about 50% of your essay is going to be how you overcame that, right? That's going to be the real meat and potatoes of this essay, because that's really what people are interested in. Well, how do you deal with adversity, right? How did you overcome that? The next 20% is going to focus on the growth, the reflection. How am I better? What is that eye toward the future? That goes in this section. And then lastly, the conclusion. So the smoothie essay, we see probably, I don't know, maybe 1 in 5 students winds up using one of these. This is a bit different in that what you're going to do is you're going to take an idea or a theme. Let's say intellectual curiosity. So you're going to take 15% of your essay and you're going to frame the importance of intellectual curiosity to you, or you're going to talk about intellectual curiosity as a concept. And then you're going to go through topic A, topic B, topic C, or really probably better word would be example. And you're going to talk about a time that you were intellectually curious, or a time that you learned about why intellectual curiosity was important, or how you plan to use intellectual curiosity in the future. And those are going to be your A, B, and C. So the A, B, and C are linked by that theme. So it's the smoothie because we're putting 3 different examples in it. lastly, you're going to come with the conclusion. The key to that essay, though, is making sure that A, B, and C create that level of growth. They create that level of movement and not stagnancy. You can't just say, I really love intellectual curiosity. This is the time I was intellectually curious. This is another time I was intellectually curious. This is the third time I was intellectually curious. Don't do that. You want to go in and you want to show an example. Hey, this is how I learned that intellectual curiosity was important. This is the first time I really ever felt like I was executing and being an intellectually curious person, and this is how it felt. This is a time where I started to teach others about intellectual curiosity, and I helped others grow and learn and understand and be better people. That structure shows you evolving as a person, and it has movement, is essential for that essay. The hybrid essay, which is really not something I would suggest doing without having somebody who's working very closely with you, is there to kind of blend the smoothie and the espresso together. We generally use it if you have a specific theme that you want to talk about, or you have an interesting thing that you overcame, but that you want to throw a little bit of an extra example in there because you have a really interesting story, or there is something about your personality that you feel like has to go into there. That would be your example A and your example B, and then you would reflect on that as well. But that is a very delicate balance to strike, and you need to be careful that you're not just shoehorning in your extra example because you think it's really good. And again, the conclusion. With all of these, I kind of glossed over the conclusion because we know what a conclusion is, but don't ever scrimp on your conclusion. This is the last thing your reader reads before they say, I'm going to pass you on to round 2, or I'm not going to pass you on to round 2. So do not scrimp on your conclusion. It's a great way to tie your story together. And think about when you read a good book or you watch a good movie, if the movie is great, but the conclusion isn't great, you leave with kind of a bad taste in your mouth. Same thing applies for this essay. And remember, we have the note at the top. The key to a good hook is to leave the reader uncertain as to what comes next. I see students all the time freak out about writing a hook. They're like, oh my God, I have to write this hook. How am I going to make it interesting? What's going to work? Your hook is one sentence. That's all it has to be. It has to be one sentence that is interesting and keeps the reader from knowing exactly where you're going with it. To the student who I was working with who was talking about leaving his mark in the first time he used pens, he wrote, the first time I ever used pens, I was 16 years old. That is a good hook because we don't know where it's going. It's thematically linked to the rest of the essay, but we don't know where it's going. It's not, I first learned the importance of making my mark when I was 16. Now I know what the whole essay is about, and I'm going, great, this is another essay about a student who's talking about leaving their mark. You want to just draw someone in, but don't freak out about it. It's one of the last things you can write. You don't have to have a hook to write the rest of your essay. The hook is a very small part, is what I'm trying to get across here. So don't freak out about it. And that, I think, brings us to the rest of to the end of our webinar. Sadia, if there are questions or anything like that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this was so helpful. I learned so much myself, although college is way behind me, but it's definitely good to learn about all these wonderful strategies. And I think the students here have definitely learned so much as well. So thank you guys so much for listening in. So Matt, thank you for keeping this slide here. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, they can just contact you via email or go to your website. What do you suggest?
Yeah, you can do any of the above. You can contact us at info@MRM. The website is mrmeducation.com. There's a few free resources here. The first is for anybody who is just looking for extra support. On Fridays, I go live and answer any questions, specific or non-specific. We post essay samples, we post school profiles, everything like that. It's also a community for people to engage with each other. And the bottom link is the Axis companion for the Common App. So that is for anybody who wants to do the Common App. but is finding it to be a little bit confusing, this tool walks you through step by step by step, every question, every box that you have to fill in, how to do it, and common bugs and workarounds. It's totally free. There's no sign up or login or anything like that. You just go to the website. It even teaches you how to use it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. So if any questions remain from anybody, please feel free to type them in the chat. We do have 7 minutes, so we can tackle a few of them. And of course, any remaining ones, I'm sure folks can join your webinars on Friday or reach out to you directly for that. So let me see. I see one question already in the chat, and the others, feel free to think through your questions and type them in. Majd is asking you, Matt, when applying to top schools like Stanford, let's say, what is the best way to describe yourself in the essay with an interest in STEM?
There's not really enough information there to answer
Right.
that question. So what I would say is, you've mentioned Stanford. So Stanford has a very specific profile. They love students who are first generation. They love students who are very social justice and socially aware. So, if you're on the Common App, you're not going to differentiate between Stanford versus Yale versus Harvard. But in a situation like this, what I would coach you to do is sort of, what about STEM really gets you excited? When did you learn that you were really interested in STEM? Is there a story there? Is there a person there? Because whatever exists in that moment is something. And that something is really kind of what's going to drive the rest of the direction of the rest of your life. And so if you're able to kind of get into what that moment is, to the person who led you there, or to the activity that you started that lit your hair on fire when you did it for the first time, you'll start to get an idea of what it is that you really care about. And that's really what those schools want to hear.
Absolutely. And I think Majd might be maybe confusing the Common App statement of purpose or main essay and maybe supplemental essays, because he added it's about the question to a message to a roommate, which I assume is probably the supplements, right?
That is one of the supplements. Yes, that's the Stanford, write a letter to your roommate. I think that's
Right.
probably what Maj is talking about. So yeah, I would say that. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm seeing the question come through now. You're sort of in that same boat in that you want to talk about. I don't know that STEM is really where I would go with this because it's a supplementary question, and really again here they're trying to get at what your personality is. So I would kind of, when you're thinking about a roommate, you're really thinking about what are your quirks, right? They're not asking you about your roommate because they want to know about your academics. They're asking you about your roommate because they want to get into the little idiosyncrasies that you have. Are you extremely fastidious? Are you a little bit of a slob? And get into those things and be very honest. It's okay if you're a little bit of a slob to say, I'm pretty messy and I need somebody who's okay with that. Because when an admissions officer reads that, they're going to say, this is a three-dimensional person. This is somebody who doesn't take themselves so seriously, because there are going to be so many people answering that question saying, I just want my roommate to know that I'm going to be up late studying until 3 a.m. because my tests are really important to me. And they have 1,000 answers like that. But there's only one person who's going to take the risk and say, I'm a bit messy, and sometimes I don't always clean up after myself. And you have the self-awareness to know that that's a flaw about yourself. But it's going to give us a real insight into who you are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt. And it's great for students to distinguish with the presentation you did tonight is about the statement of purpose, which is the Common App essay that goes to all the schools you apply to, whereas the supplements, they go to specific schools. Just want to make sure that students understand that difference. We have a couple more questions and we have time for that. So Han is asking, for schools who ask for a personal statement, but also ask to include why you are interested in joining that program, how would you suggest to structure that essay in particular? Blend in your personal narrative and why you want to join the program.
So I think you're talking about two different things, right? One of these is the why, essentially, like, why are you choosing your major question? That's going to be a supplemental. And again, Sajia will clarify after this that we're talking about the personal statement, but I'll answer it because I'm here, if that's okay.
Of course.
When you're talking about the why us question, right? Or the why your major, get hyper specific, right? Really get into the specifics of this program. I'm talking about the professor. I'm talking about a specific class they have. I'm talking about clubs and other non-academic programs that they have that relate to that. I'm talking about get as specific as you possibly can. If there is a club that you want to get involved with, I'm saying you should go call the head of that club or email the head of that club and be like, hey, what is it you guys do? And then use that quote in your why us essay. Because you'll show them not only that you're interested, not only that you're engaged and that you have work ethic, but that you are a go-getter and that you care and that you really want to be here. As far as, sorry, I'm trying to read the question here as I answer it. For the schools who ask for a personal statement. So the personal statement there would, again, that's talking about your program. The personal statement, now I want to know, how are you as a person? Now I know what it's, I want to have an idea of, like, what are the chief themes in your life? I want to know what you care about. I want to know what you love. I want to know what you laugh at. These are the things. I want to know what the seminal moments in your life are that drove you to where you are today. And that isn't necessarily related to your major. It might tangentially relate. You might really want to go into a law program because you once met an immigrant who struggled through the documentation process. And so now you want to be a lawyer, right? The seminal moment there would be when you met this person who struggled with it and that really touched you. And so it taught you a lesson and now you're going down this path. That's more your personal statement. That's your statement about empathy and caring about others. Whereas in that example, why this program would be the specifics about the law program and how they focus on immigration law, or they have a wonderful professor who served as the Secretary of the Interior or what have you. I hope that answer makes sense.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you so much for clarifying. And when I was just a sophomore and junior, I was so confused. What is the statement of purpose? What is the supplement? So it's really good for students to ask these questions and start distinguishing between these aspects of the Common App. And of course, if you are right now sitting on this webinar and you're like, what is the difference between those? How can I get my way through this? Please reach out to Matt. That's exactly what he does. And he'll guide you through that experience of figuring out everything about the Common App, which I understand can be very confusing. We do have one last question. Not sure if you're able to answer it, Matt, but basically it's about the essay topic number 7. I'm not sure if you know it off the top of your head, but the student is asking if there is a place or field in the Common App to specifically mention what the topic or title of the essay is.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So they're talking about number 7, the open-ended prompt, the one that says choose your own destiny, if you will. And if I'm incorrect about that, someone write that in the chat and let me know. But so I'll answer it in terms of that. To my knowledge, there is not a drop-down menu. I think a drop-down menu would sort of defeat the purpose of giving you that freedom. If there was a drop-down menu, then it would sort of say, well, you're hemmed into this one. So look, sometimes when you're answering that one, it's going to be clear enough from the writing alone. You don't need to add a title. If you feel like, ooh, I'm not sure. And there are situations where we do need to sort of make sure that the admissions officers know where you're going with this. We will put a title on it. And that is totally acceptable. I've had kids get accepted into great schools with titles. I've had kids get accepted to great schools without it. Don't make up your own prompt. Like, don't make up your own prompt and then write it at the top. What you want to do, if you are going to guide them at all, is give them a title that's going to lead them to understand what you're writing about. But if your writing is clear, you can probably get away without doing anything.
Awesome. Someone is asking quickly, what are the supplemental essays? Maybe like as a concluding thought, you can sort of distinguish the difference between the statement of purpose and supplemental essay. But of course,
Sure.
I invite people to reach out to you to talk about it more. And then lastly, if you have any sort of parting words or recommendations, advice for our students.
Sure. So yeah, so the supplemental essays, when you're dealing with the Common App and really across all schools, there is a personal statement. That is going to be your longest essay. Like I said, it's about 600 words, and that is going to be about who you are. It's about your person. It's about your story. It's about what has happened to you, what's important to you, and why those things are leading you to where you're going. As you choose your schools, the ones that you apply to, they are going to ask you what we call supplemental essays. These are individual questions which will go anywhere from why do you want to go into this university to why do you want to go into this program, or as our first question was, write a letter to your roommate telling them what they should expect of you. So they get to be very kind of like dry and basic, and they can also be very kind of quirky and particular. If you do the USCSA, they ask you questions like, what TV show are you going to binge watch next? What are your 3 favorite words? Stuff like that. So those are the ones with the supplemental essays. You just want to get hyper specific with those. You want to show that you've done your research. And I don't want to answer too much because I feel like Sajid is going to get mad at me for answering.
No, not at all.
Too much.
No. I just typed in this chat that basically tonight you were basically talking about the statement of purpose. That was the goal of tonight's conversation. And the statement of purpose, or we call it SOP, goes to all the schools, whereas each school, if you apply, let's say, for example, you're applying to Stanford, Yale, and Harvard, they're all going to receive the same statement of purpose, but each of these 3 schools will have different supplemental essay questions that you will have to also answer for each of them. Does that sound right, Matt?
That is absolutely correct. And so yes, you'll hear statement of purpose, you'll hear personal statement, you'll hear Common App essay, you'll hear college essay. These are all the big one that I was talking about today. Yes, and even schools outside of the Common App will have some form of personal statement, which, if you want to think about it in your most basic terms, if there are any superhero fans out there, this is your origin story.
Yes, exactly.
That's the most simple way to put it.
Yes, absolutely. And then supplements, each school will have supplements of their own. Some schools have 1, others have 2, 3, really depends. And they're usually shorter. But
if you
yeah,
want to know,
go ahead.
sorry, I didn't cut you off. If you want to know what the supplementals in a school are going to look like, go onto the Common App essay, go into the Common application, put the school you want to go in, put in Stanford, right? And then say, I want to major in English at Stanford. Your supplements will pop up and you'll see what they're asking you. And that's how you figure out what they want to ask you. Those are the ones you get specific on.
Correct. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that tonight a lot of students got to learn about the statement of purpose, the way I used to call it when I was in college, in high school, was SOP. Glad that you guys were able to learn about it. Also, some of you learned about the difference between the statement of purpose and supplements. So that's awesome too. We will send you a recording of this call so that you can review the information again. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Matt. He's very knowledgeable, very helpful and patient. So definitely recommend working with him if you have more questions. And of course, attend those free webinars that he does on Friday. And before we close, I'll just pass it over to you, Matt, if you have any advice or last sort of concluding thoughts for the students and parents here.
Yes, take a deep breath. This is a really stressful time. Don't make it more stressful than it has to be. Your list is going to be built properly. You're going to get into some of the schools you really want to get into, but you're not going to get into all of them. Make sure you enjoy the process. Focus on the things that you are good at. Focus on the things that you love. Don't try and game the system and do what you and tell people what you think they want to hear. Do what matters to you, and you will wind up in the right place.
Thank you so much, Matt. This was very, very nice of you to do and talk to our students tonight. We really appreciate it. And with that, everybody have a good night. We'll reach out to you via email tomorrow morning. And a lot of folks are saying, thank you, Matt. They're sending it to me in my direct messages, but we are very thankful. Thank you so much, and have a good night, everybody. Bye.